Hey everybody, Eric Dorward here with the Spartan Rocketry Club. Hopefully this will be it for me putting the decals on my Estes BOSS here. Uh, I have painstakingly trying to figure out where the rest of these go, and unfortunately, in the process, I came to a couple realizations. One was because I put the launch lug apparently on the wrong side. This is going to have to be a little bit different, and I also realized that the decals here on the fin part, they're backwards, unfortunately. These are supposed to be like contours on the tail end, which I did wrong. But whatever. I mean, honestly, the idea of having looks like a control flap on a spaceship seems kind of silly. You know, what would you possibly do with it? It's not like a spaceship needs a tail fin if it's just going to be in orbital space. But anyway, you know, whatever. It's fine. Again, how good do you want it to be? Well, hopefully you want it to look pretty nice, but we're not shooting for utter perfection here. So in any event, I lined up the rest of the decals. These are going to go across the bottom like this. So I want to put this definitely on, but after I've finished the bottom here so I can flip things over. So the rest of these I've tried to line up going from nose to tail. So this is the only other one that goes on the nose cone. And the rest of these in general are pretty small, so that could be potentially difficult to work with, maybe, or you know, it might be great. Who's to say? The small ones, well, they tend to be easier to get off the backing, and they tend to be easy to move around. The biggest problem I have, honestly, with most of the small ones is figuring out where they go. All right, so that first one, and I'm just going off, you know, right off the diagram here. This is probably your best bet. The box art's great, except that it only really shows one face, and this is not the face it's showing. So, you know, not super useful. Anyway, that's it for the nose cone. I could actually take that off and just put it someplace else so it doesn't get in the way. The rest of these should be going on the body tube itself. And I'm just going to try to keep cycling these through. So I have one in the water. I didn't really want to pull that off, but sometimes these small ones you don't have much of a choice. So I have one in the water, you know, getting soaked while I'm adjusting the other one. I do want to keep these basically centered, so it would be nice if my rocket here was actually on the ground flat, so I can use that as a reference. And that's pretty good. Again, if your fingers are wet, things should slide. If your fingers are not wet, you're much more likely to end up tearing things. So do keep them damp. All right, this next one, this like vent, is going to go right around here. And then I'm going to be kind of, well, I'm not exactly breaking with the rules. These ones are supposed to be on the underside, but they're supposed to be around the launch lug. But they should actually fit pretty nicely here and here, though, which is why I'm still following this instruction set. Okay, again, I want them roughly centered. Yeah, probably a little farther up than that. I'm going to line it up with that portal. I would like them cut in line with each other, but again, I'm eyeballing this. You certainly could break out a ruler and do all this exceedingly neatly, but there aren't any measurements provided in the instructions, so you're just guessing one way or the other, and I'm not sure I have the patience for that. Anyway, so this next one, the one that's in the water, I will get out for a second, but this one's going to go right here. I'm just going to kind of leave this here as a moment to use this kind of like a gauge for where the other one's going to go. This one's supposed to go laterally, so like this, with the little circle part facing away from me. So I'm going to try to center that up. I'm also going to try to not have it fold up on itself, which it has. Yeah. And when they're this small, it's often very hard to figure out which side is folded on top of which, right? So I I can't tell if the top is folded on the bottom or the bottom is folded up onto the top. There we go. It was the underside that was folded up. So using my fingernails, again, this stuff is so thin, it's really easy to tear it. So do be careful. So now the last thing you want to do is, while you're trying to straighten out a tiny little bit, end up just tearing it to pieces, which, oh, that's definitely happened for me. If that happens, it's not actually the end of the world, right? Obviously, you could just not put the decal on entirely, but the alternative is just put the two pieces together and try to jigsaw them back. And frequently you can do a passable job, unless you've deformed the decal in the process, which, that's certainly happened to me in the past as well. But the best plan, of course, is to avoid that problem entirely and not damage the thing. Oops. Good. Again, once you get these things in, once you get these things in place, blotting with the paper towel is kind of how you set everything. It's not really permanent, right? It doesn't truly set it. It just makes it a lot harder to screw up after that point. Okay. The next two, these guys, they go at the end of the pods, the motor pods. So that's why I've got two of them. There's one per each. Oops. Okay. Let's move this up. Move this up a little bit. Alright, so these are actually very hard to see, to be honest with you. I think, yeah, this one actually goes on the far pod from me, and this one goes on the near pod. The circle part, they face up like this, and the circle's on the outside. And yeah, I believe that's right. So that's just going to go kind of about here. Like so. That's pretty good. It's roughly in line with the one up front. Okay. You'll notice too that I have a big cereal, well, it's not that big, but a bigger cereal bowl this time, as opposed to the usual little custard cup I use. The custard cup does fine for almost all the decals that I work with on a regular basis, even the surprisingly large ones, because they typically kind of coil themselves up. But the big circular one isn't going to do that. I plopped it into this bowl dry just to make sure it would even fit. That seemed like a prudent first step. Alright, so I'm going to give the big circular one a try now. So in it goes. It curled, right, but I mean still it barely fits in the bowl. My little custard cup didn't have a prayer. So I want to get that as submerged as possible. The water is going to, creep up the decal, but the deeper in, the better. In looking at the decals too, on my picture here, these two, I have no idea where they go. I looked, and I just don't see them anywhere. So, I mean, you don't have to use all the decals. You don't have to use any decals. It's your rocket. Build it however you see fit. But I do like to generally get all the decals on, and I have no clue where those two are supposed to go. They just, I don't know. Not sure what to say about that. So I guess I'm just going to leave them off, unless I can't imagine there's anything on the box that would show me any better, because it's just the one side I said. So I don't know. This I'm going to put roughly here. And I guess that's kind of it. So there are just 2 more decals to do. I'm going to let this sit as long as possible. This water was very hot too when I started to, which is nice. Because if you recall, or you watched in the previous videos, the glue in this, the adhesive in this was actually pretty strong. And it was kind of difficult to take some of these off. So no harm in letting this soak extra long, I think. Now usually that does make me a little nervous, but this time I am less so. Alright, let's take a look here. It has not loosened up much, if at all. So, maybe what I do is I toss this one in as well. I'm not worried about them, like getting stuck to each other. I suppose I probably should be, but this guy should actually float kind of on the top. And my big circular decal is pretty well submerged at this point. This one, anyway, as I mentioned, it's supposed to go. Yeah, where is it supposed to go? It's supposed to go in front of the little yellow strip on the underside, which is really supposed to be on the top side. So I'm going to plop it like right about there. I think that's probably a good place for it. Let's see how loose it is. Yeah, that'll be all right, probably. That got a little twisted coming off. Actually, it looks... I was a little concerned there that it might have become a little deformed, but it looks alright. Just going to do my best to make sure it is as straight as possible before I try to smooth everything out, because it was not on straight. Yeah, it might have gotten a little deformed by removing it, because I did have to apply a little bit more pressure than usual. It's alright. Okay, let's try the big round one again. Okay. Alright, it's largely movable at this point. Actually, there's a little bit of excess water. Let's try to get rid of that. Alright, I don't want this to curl up as I'm going, so let's just make sure that there aren't any bits that have already folded over on themselves, and it looks like they're right here. It was a little bit. So I'm going to hold it tight here, and I'm going to slowly pull out the paper. If I did this reasonably well, it should be pretty well centered on the disc. That looks pretty good. Okay, now the fact that I have a light nearby is actually pretty useful for this, because like this, it's hard for me to see, but with the glare of the light, you can see where the air bubbles and where the creases and things are. So I'm going to just try to smooth this out with my quite wet fingers still before I try to use the paper, because there are definite air bubbles in this, and I think you would be very hard pressed to do this without putting any air bubbles in it. They weren't big, but they did exist, and I would prefer them not to. So I'm just going to push them out to the side, and that should take care of things. Alright. Feel pretty good about that. I'm going to blot just in general to get rid of, because there was a lot of water on that. And now I'm going to hold one side and just push toward the other, and if there are any little air bubbles at this point, that should get rid of them, or drive them out to the edges, and they'll go away. There are some little divots here I can see that are imperfections in the finish. Maybe like a little glue blob or something like that got left over, but overall it's not bad. Now I'm going to go back and do the other side where I was holding, and that does it. Alright, well, 2 missing decals that I have no idea where they go. That's not bad, all things being equal. I'm going to put the nose cone back on. This thing is ready to hit the paint shop, I think. Yeah. This one doesn't look like it's as centered as it could be. Yeah, well, maybe it's this one actually. Well, either way, it's not bad. It's decent. So it needs a clear coat, and then we should be able to wrap it up in the next video. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you then.